Shaw, KC2LGM. I am the president of the Fairlawn Amateur Radio Club. I want to thank each and every one of you for coming out tonight. It's a very exciting moment tonight with the solar eclipse coming next month. It's all something for us to learn, and if you have the ability to travel to the States, I'm very happy. In other words, all the rest of us are just going to take a peek at it. At this point in time, with all our affairs, including our business meetings, we're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance. Please, everyone stand with heads off. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much, everyone. See? What I'd like to do at this time, I'd like to hand over the program to Ed, our Publicity Committee Manager here. And Ed, come on up.
Thank you, Judith.
Take it right over and I'll have a seat.
Well, good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Ed.
Good evening. Boy, have I got everybody trained or what? This is great. Thank you all for coming and happy July. So tonight we're really fortunate to have what I tend to think is probably one of the best topical speakers that we've ever had. So, anyone get QST? How's this? Hands are up?
Yeah.
What was the cover story?
Yep.
How good, how topical is this, right? Okay. Anybody get Radcom from RSGB? What luck? Same cover, different eclipse. Different eclipse. Okay, but nevertheless, I think we're just really, really fortunate tonight to have Nathaniel Frissell, okay, and his team from NJIT, Josh, and Anna, okay, here to really put on, I think, what is really a very, very topical and informative show for us tonight. So we'll talk a little bit at the end, just in terms of other programming that we have. I won't take away from Nathaniel's time. But his bio, I don't know if anybody had a chance to look on QRZ. Okay, this is a really interesting guy, folks. So he's the assistant research professor at NJIT for their Solar Terrestrial Research Department. Don't you wish you worked with the Solar Terrestrial Research Department? Okay, obviously his primary interest in terms of understanding physics and the ionosphere and sort of how that all comes together. So he completed a PhD in electrical engineering at Virginia Tech. As we learned tonight, he's been to Antarctica and points north and points south, okay, and just in terms of his study. So, and is also obviously really interested in terms of amateur radio and scouts and amateur radio and everything else. So, I won't hold up the program, okay, because we've got a lot to talk about. So without any further introduction, let me turn it over to Nathaniel Frissell, W2NAF.
Thank you very much, Ed. I really appreciate that. I'd actually like to first start out with a word from our sponsor, as they say. My sponsor is NJIT. So I'd like to see a show of hands. Is there anyone here who is an alumni of NJIT? You do. We have one. That's awesome.
My son.
And your son over there, so we have a couple. And so that's really neat that I can come here and be a part of this, represent the college, and speak to an audience with people who are from there. Well, I brought with me tonight two of my students who currently go there. It's very easy to remember their names because their name is Josh and Josh. And, and we also have Josh's girlfriend, Anna, who's also a ham radio operator, so they are all ham radio operators. And they are part of the NJIT Amateur Radio Club K2MFF. We have a really nice station there, a nice active club now, which is great. Yes, and we even have call signs you can get, or I'm sorry, QSL cards you can get from our club. So Josh, number one, that Josh, he has a special thing he wants to talk to you about really quickly.
So I'm starting another club at NJIT. I want to start a retro computing club because I love old computers and I like it when they make noise and turn on and you have huge CRTs and all that stuff. So I want to give students a chance to experience what computing used to be like and how they actually worked, and actually learn about the low-level side of technology. So if you're interested in hearing more about that, please talk to me after the show. So I'm going to give them back this nice plan.
So if you have old computer equipment and you want to get rid of it, go talk to Josh. All right, so HamSCI in the 2017 total solar eclipse. HamSCI is the Ham Radio Science Citizen Investigation, and that is an organization that I've started to join the amateur radio community, which I come from, with the professional research, Ionosphere research community, which I'm now a member of. And so this brings those two groups together. So I have many co-authors on this list, and that's because this is a very collaborative citizen science type of project. And so I could not have done it with all of these people, including the students you see here, with some of the team from Virginia Tech. They're the main drivers behind the Eclipse project that I'm going to be talking about tonight. So I just want to acknowledge all of them. Okay, so for the outline this evening, I'd like to talk about first ham radio and space weather, which is a topic that all of you are probably fairly well familiar with. Then I'll be talking about something called the Reverse Beacon Network FOF2 parameter. And then finally, I'll be talking about the Great American Eclipse. Now, as I said, even though I'm a professional ionosphere researcher and physicist today, I really got my start in amateur radio. And this is the station in the bedroom of my house in Bloomfield. So I grew up in Bloomfield, not far from here. I learned about ham radio from Greg Nitkowski, N2BSA, whom some of you may know. And I learned about it at a Jamboree on the Air weekend, cold, wet one, back when I was in 7th or 8th grade at Camp Glen Gray. And that's what got all this started. I just stuck with it my entire life, and I found it so interesting I eventually got my PhD in ionospheric physics. And so, as we know, ham radio is a hobby for radio enthusiasts. And who are we? Well, we're communicators. We are builders. We are experimenters. And we come from a wide-reaching demographic. I mean, I can look around this room and I can see, people who are very young, through people who are much more experienced, through I see men and women, people with diverse ranges of education as well. And that's really neat. And so in the United States, there's over 730,000 hams, and there's about 3 million of us worldwide. And this is important for a couple reasons. One, I'm trying to do a citizen science type of project, so when I talk about that to, say, the National Science Foundation or other researchers, it's really good to say, what a big community we are when we go reach out to the ham radio operators. There's a lot of us. And the other thing that's really nice to say is that not only is there a lot of us, but, we as ham radio operators, we're very interested in this sort of thing, and we're also, we have a certain amount of education. We have a really good technical background. Many of the people in this room are extremely accomplished, and many people want to learn. Even the extremely accomplished people, they want to keep learning. That's what I want to do. So it's really neat that we have this demographic. I am particularly interested in the ionosphere, as these are the HF and some of the HF ham radio bands, and we know that these bands have varied wavelengths going from 160 meters down to about 10 meters, and we can talk all around the world with these frequencies. And we know that they don't behave the same way all the time. Sometimes you can reach Kazakhstan on 20 meters. Sometimes you can't talk to the next door town on 20 meters. But you wait a few hours and things change, and then all of a sudden you can talk to some other place. You're talking to Russia, you're talking to Ukraine. You get a lot of interesting things. But all this is not completely random. These changes, the changes in the way these bands behave, isn't just entirely random chance. It's because of things. It's because the sun is impacting, the ultraviolet energy from the sun is impacting our atmosphere and causing ionization in the upper regions of the atmosphere. And then as the atmosphere gets either stronger or weaker, that changes how the bands behave. If you get solar flares, if you get geomagnetic influences, that all changes. And all of those influences, those are called space weather. And so what I was interested in is, can I and can we, understand space weather, understand some of these physics problems, understand propagation a little bit better by looking at how people communicate on the HF bands. And again, over here, this is the NJIT K2MFF ham radio shack. We've got some students participating in a contest over there. So I wanted to show this to just give you a little bit better idea of how these bands are affected by the ionosphere. I have two what are called ray trace, HF high frequency ray trace plots on the screen here. I have them for two different frequencies. On the top I have 15 megahertz, and on the bottom I have 10 megahertz. So this is kind of close to the 20 meter band, and this one's kind of close, this one is basically on the 30 meter band. And I'm plotting altitude on the y-axis from 0 to 500 kilometers altitude, and I'm plotting along the x-axis ground range from 0 to 2,000 kilometers. And at the origin, in the lower left-hand corner, I have a transmitter. The colors you see in the background are what we call ionospheric electron densities. So this is the number of electrons per meter cubed at any point in the ionosphere along this path. And you can see that down toward the ground, we don't really have any free electrons over here. But as you go up, you get these blue regions, you get slightly more electrons, and then you end up in the F region. That's this red region up here. You get lots of electrons, and then it starts tapering off as you go up into space. Now, many people are probably familiar with the concept of an index of refraction in optics, and that's you can figure out a number that says how much a light ray, is going to bend. Well, you can actually calculate an index of refraction for the ionosphere too. If you know the frequency of the radio signal that you're using, and you know the electron density, you can come up with an index of refraction. And so that's why, and then if you know that, then you can run something called a ray trace program, and you can calculate where a particular ray goes. So here we have the 15 megahertz transmitter sending the signals out, and we can compute how much that signal is going to be bent by the ionosphere. You can see we get our first response, our first hit back to the ground at around 1,500 kilometers, and then it bounces back up again. Different elevation angles will go through differently. You end up having, if you go above the critical frequency there, you'll end up just going out into space. If you go below the critical frequency, it will bounce back to Earth, or refract back to Earth, bend back to Earth. If you choose a lower frequency, like 10 megahertz, you actually get more bending. So now we get more of the rays coming down around 750 kilometers, and then you get a second bounce, and then you have more coming down at 1,500 kilometers, etc. And so you can see just by changing frequency, the different bands have different properties. And the other thing that you have is, because ultraviolet rays are what's causing this ionization, you'll have the ionosphere be stronger during the day versus the night. So if I showed another plot of day versus night, you would see that these would be very different as well. So the idea here is that this is a computational tool that can help us take a look at the ham radio data that we're able to collect, and hopefully get some interpretation, make some guesses about what the ionosphere looks like based on who's talking to who, when and what time. Okay? So where do we get this data from? Any ideas? Where could we get ham radio data that would tell us who is talking to who, when, and where?
Reverse beacons.
Yeah, the reverse speaking network. Contesters. Any other places?
Ionosphere experiments.
Ionosphere experiments, but that's more of a professional thing, not the ham radio thing. But yes, that's a very useful data source. So the reverse speaking network, this I think is just really brilliant. It's really cool. How many people here are familiar with it? We've got a few. So the idea here is that if you go on the HF radio right now and you start calling CQ, there is a network of automated radio receivers that will automatically hear you and decode your Morse code and then send a spot up to this website called the Reverse Speaking Network. And you can go to this website and you can search by your call sign and have it only show your call sign. As you're calling CQ, you can see everyone who's calling you. And they've been running, this software is powered by a program called CW Skimmer, which was written by Alex Shovkopoulos, VE3NEA, and it's able to decode multiple CW signals simultaneously. Okay, that's a really big deal, because usually when you're listening to your radio, you're listening to one signal at a time. Now, if you have a software-defined radio like a flex radio, you're used to seeing these larger segments of bandwidth through the waterfall display. Okay, similar if you're operating PSK on a traditional radio, you can see multiple signals at a time. So these software-defined radios have really been a game changer in terms of what we're able to do, because now we don't just listen to one signal at a time, but we listen to many at a time. And we don't just listen to one band at a time, but we listen to all of the ham radio bands, all simultaneously with a single station. And so this can provide a tremendous amount of data. So right now the Reverse Speaking Network decodes Morse code and radio teletype. It's a volunteer network, so people like us set up
receive nodes and connect it to this website. Right now there's about 130 nodes that are working, and they archive all of these spots. So anyone here can go onto this website and download all the spots that have been seen by this network all the way back to 2009. So that's a really cool setup. So when I first learned about this, I actually learned about this when I was helping to build a super darn radar on Adak Island, which is out in Alaska. When I first learned about this, I'm like, oh, that's really cool. My friend Ethan Miller, K8GU, he showed this website to me. And I said, I wonder if we can do any space weather studies with it. So when I got back here to New Jersey, I was visiting Andy Gerard, my supervisor at NJIT, and he said, you should write a little paper about this. I said, okay. So I went and I downloaded some reverse beacon network data, and I looked at solar flares. Because you know what happens to the HF bands during solar flares? What happens?
Nothing good. They go away.
Nothing good, yeah, it just kind of goes away, right? So I went to the NOAA GOES Geospace Operational Environmental Satellite. I went to their data, and they're measuring the X-ray flux from the sun. And I found an X-class flare, and I said, okay, there's a nice X-class flare. What do I get if I look at the reverse beacon network data? So I plotted all of the communication links observed by the RBN for a period of 15 minutes before the flare, and look at all this communication that's going on. It's color-coded by band, so the green is 40 meters, the yellow is 20 meters, the orange is 15 meters, and the red is 10 meters. And you can see there's just lots of communications going on all around the world. And you can see what we call the terminator. That's the difference between day and night. So the United States is in the day side, that's that white area there, and then Asia is in darkness, and then Europe is kind of on the gray line. It's almost on the gray line, more on the flank. And so then I looked for the 15-minute period right after the flare, and look what happened. It's really dramatic, right? So that's really cool that pretty much the solar flare impacts mostly the day side, because that's where the sun is. And so that's where most of the communications got wiped out. Pretty much everything in the US, Canada, and going down into Mexico and South America. So that just got wiped out. Europe is more on the flanks, on the side, so it was less affected. And, but you can see this really nicely in the reverse beacon network data. I made a couple more of these before and after, and you can see it gradually recover afterward. It was really nice. And so I was actually able to get this published in Space Weather Quarterly, Space Weather Journal. So it was really nice that we could actually do something with that. So now what we're doing is we're continuing to try to work with this data. This is just one more example of data. We can look at contest weekends. This is November sweepstakes CW in 2014. And here I have just the number of spots that the RBN observes throughout the weekend. Okay? So it starts off, this is Friday over here. It's pretty low, about less than 2,000 spots per unit time down here. And then gradually, you know how you get ready for the big contest and you start checking your station out, just seeing if it's ready to go on the air. You can see a little rise as people are doing that, and then do you think you can tell when the contest starts? Yeah, it kind of like spikes, and we have over 12,000 spots. I think I did per like 15-minute bin, either 5 or 15-minute bin in this plot here. 12,000 spots for all of like Saturday. And then as people go to bed, you know, these operators, you guys need to be more dedicated. You have to stay up all through the night. No, people decide their sleep is more valuable than their radio operating for some reason. I don't know why. And then they come back on Sunday. And you can see this. Now, what's cool is you can actually see some space weather effects in this. Even in spite of what we call the anthropogenic effects. The anthropogenic effects is this idea that, you know, humans go to bed, so we lose our data points. But if you look over here, you see a little dip over here. That corresponds with some things you see up here. Now, these little green lollipops plots here, that's the KP index, and that's something most of you are probably familiar with. The KP is the planetary K index, and that's an index of how disturbed the Earth's geomagnetic field is. So if you shake up the Earth's geomagnetic field, it moves the ionosphere around a lot, and then you can't get this nice refraction. And so that causes a dip in the communications that are going on. You also see around the same time, you see a spike in what's called the auroral electrojet, or AE index. This is a measure of how active the aurora is. Again, it's tied to the Earth's geomagnetic field, but especially in the polar regions. And so you can see there's a spike in the AE. There's KP goes up to about 4 over here, and we also have this image does some stuff too. But you get all of this geomagnetic activity, and you can see that in the data. So this is really nice. We can start to see some of these effects in the RVN data. So I mentioned that we have, you can actually monitor multiple ham radio bands simultaneously with a single station. So we at NJIT installed the reverse beacon network receiver. We actually installed 2 of them at the UACNJ Observatory at the Jenny Jump State Park in Hope, New Jersey. Has anyone here been there?
Yep.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place, and every Saturday evening they have public lectures. So I've actually given this talk up there as well. And then after the public lecture, they have a public telescope night where you can go out in this field, and each of these little huts has a telescope in it, and you can look at the stars, and there are other people out there with telescopes. So all of those huts have telescopes for looking at the stars or the sun, except for this one over here. So that telescope hut actually belongs to NJIT, and we have a LiDAR system in there, which uses a green laser to measure atmospheric densities. And now we also have a reverse beacon network receiver in that hut also. So the receive equipment's in the hut, and then the antennas are up here. And so if you go home tonight and you say go on 40 or 80 meters and you call CQ, if you see any of the K2 MFF -2 or -3 RBN receivers pick up your signal, you know that you're being heard in Hope, New Jersey at UACNJ. Now, those receivers are being powered by rather inexpensive equipment. Well, we have an active magnetic loop up there, active receive loop. That's one of our antennas, and we also have an active vertical, both by DX Engineering. Those are the antennas, and they're broadband, so they go from a little above 0 to 30 megahertz. And then this is our receiver rack, and it has a CODAR experiment up here that belongs to my friend Ethan, KHEU. And then my RBN receivers are down here. We've got 2 computers.